Hi there. I wanted to record a little bit of an intro for this video. I recorded this back on January 14th. It was just the day before I went to go visit my dad in one of his physical therapy sessions as he was recovering from hip surgery. When I recorded this video, I did not have any inkling, any indication that not only would I lose my dad within a few days of recording it, but I would also lose my grandfather 4 days after that. So my family has faced a lot of loss in this past week. We had a health scare with another family member all at the same time, which I don't think is unusual for what people have been facing with COVID. There's other families who have gone through far worse loss than we have. Fortunately for us, we didn't lose anyone to COVID. We lost both of these people to complications from hip surgery. And it's important for me to let you know that before watching this Radiant Resilience video, because it's important for me to be emotionally transparent with the folks that I'm working with. For folks to know that, hey, I'm struggling too. Hey, things are not easy for me either. And that I have a trust and a faith in humanity for all of us to be able to get through things together with that vulnerability and that transparency and that honesty that matters so much to me. And that emotional vulnerability is something that my dad really fostered in me. We would spend hours talking about my emotional landscape. We would spend hours dissecting how I felt about things and how I wanted to transform those experiences into something useful for others. My dedication to public service, my dedication to politics, my dedication to public policy is in large part due to my dad and his intent fight for justice, for social justice. He helped me see the patterns in society that are not always visible. He taught me to look underneath the surface of things, to read between the lines, to see what was being said as well as what was not being said. And everything that I am today, everything that I have chosen to share with others is so directly connected to my dad that it would be impossible for me to post a video, especially after his death, without acknowledging that and sharing some moments of gratitude for everything that he created for me, to support me and to support this work that I do. One of the last things he talked to me about before he died, I was very lucky to have a moment with him before he died and to be able to say goodbye. But one of the things he talked about after I was sharing with him a public figure who was expressing their sorrow at his illness, he said, I don't believe it. That's, I'm not important enough for that person to care about me. And we talked for a little bit about how he has spent most of his life feeling unworthy of love and attention and affection. And more than anything, he made me promise that ends with me, that we do not carry on this family tradition of feeling undeserving or unworthy of the love that we receive. And the work that I do and everything that I'm about is to share this message with a grander audience, with a larger audience, to be bigger. And my dad meant everything to me. And so the best way that I can honor him is by sharing that message with you. Recognizing that a man in my life was so very influential in making me the emotionally vulnerable, transparent, and ultimately strong person that many of you comment about now. And so I really wanted him to watch this video. And so I want you to hopefully see his influence in how I describe resilience and in how I apply it in my own life. And I hope that over the next few months, as we watch, as I share more, that you'll see that love and that emotion and that value come forth in the work that I do with you and what I share with the world. So thank you so much for your dedication and for watching this. And let's make the world safe for vulnerable and sensitive souls like my dad, like me, like you. That's all I'm here to do. And I want to fulfill my dad's wishes by sharing that with you as often and as deeply as I can. So thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of your month. There will be another video coming soon in February, but I hope this explains the absence over the last week or so. Thank you. Thanks again. Hi, and welcome back to Rose Connections. I'm Janet Rose, and I am a former social justice attorney and a heart-centered leadership coach. And everything that I'm doing, everything on this channel that you find contributes in some way to building a more trauma-informed society and really promoting heart-centered leadership as the means by which we get there. You'll find several different videos on this channel of all the different ways in which I look at this kind of continuum of what leadership really means, knowing yourself, being able to interact with others, and being able to lead from a place of vulnerability as strength. And that's really what I want to focus on today, is that vulnerability as strength. And I've talked about it before. You know, there's other videos on this channel right now that you can take a look at. There's other videos from other providers out there. But today specifically, I really wanted to cover the topic of resilience and what resilience means, because the hashtag I use is radiant resilience. So what does that actually mean? And I actually gave a talk in the last week or so about resilience, specifically, you know, geared toward a specific genre of fiction and using those fictional images to really understand our own resilience. But as we talk about it more and more, as we talk about what it's going to take for us to recover from COVID, what it's going to take for us to, quote, get up back on track, or to, you know, lift up new systems to replace ones that have been dismantled during the past year and a half, actually last 4 years, I would say. We are going to be talking a lot about resilience. We're going to be hearing a lot about it, I would say, at least for the next 5 years. That's going to become a household word, and it's going to be a pretty overused word if it isn't already to a certain extent. So understanding what resilience actually is and what it actually means is, I think, part of the name of the game here, right? It's what we are going to have to do as a society to come back from all of this, to bounce back. So with that, I actually do want to share my screen. And if I can get to the taskbar, that would be even better. I'm going to share my screen real quick after I had some trouble figuring out the best way to do that. There we go. All right. So talking about models of resilience, I'm going to move things around a little bit so I can see a little bit better. Recognizing what that looks like for ourselves, how we define it, and how it compares and contrasts to other things that we do. So what is resilience? What is the actual definition? And according to the American Psychological Association, which I would pretty much trust with this information, it means the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. So basically, adversity. Adversity covers a whole spectrum of human experiences. And the really big thing, the big takeaway here is that none of us are immune to adversity. All of us regularly face adversity on some level or another. And adversity can be anything from the significant traumas that I have already talked about in other episodes of this channel, but it can also be something as simple as a disappointment, working really, really hard to pass a test and then finding out you didn't pass the test. I know that when I didn't pass the bar exam the first time, that, quote, disappointment really did feel like adversity to me, because it suddenly was, okay, this thing that I was planning on facing the bar exam did not happen for me, what's next? I'm going to have to pivot. I'm going to have to switch gears. I'm going to have to adapt to this idea of this adversity that I have encountered. And none of us, like I said, none of us are immune to adversity. There are levels of privilege that make it easier to face adversity, certain types of adversity more than others, but all of us have faced it on some level or another. And what I do like about the APA's definition here is it really does run that gamut of, it's not just trauma, it's not just tragedy, but it's also significant sources of stress. It can be a job change, it can be COVID, it can be a lot of other different things here that all come into the mix. All right. Moving on. So a lot of times we have people who will compare grit and fortitude and mental toughness to resilience, and sometimes use them as synonyms of each other. So I wanted to distinguish what those different things were. Grit, as you can see here on the screen, says it's the ability to make sacrifices in order to reach a longer term goal. So it's, for example, it is denying yourself certain pleasures. I really want to play video games tonight, but I really, really need to write this report. It's choosing to write the report instead of playing the video games so that you can get that longer term goal done. Fortitude is knowing that you're about to face something and gearing up for it. It's putting on that emotional armor, sometimes even physical armor. It is fortifying yourself and getting all your ducks in a row so that you can move forward into that adverse situation with a lot more confidence and ease. And mental toughness. Talk about confidence. Mental toughness is all about confidence and that mental hardiness to be able to reason effectively during distress and difficulty. All of these things, but especially mental toughness, tend to be treated as a light switch, like it's either on or it's off. Either you have it or you don't, which I think is a really disempowering message. Really, what I want to look at is the fact that these things, and mental toughness in particular, is like a muscle. If you're not using the muscle, it's going to atrophy. It's going to be harder to have that mental toughness when you really need it. But frankly, the more that you go through and the more that you're able to walk out of there with some level of resilience, the more mental toughness you're going to have in order to be able to get through the next thing. But just like muscles can also be overworked, when your body is overstressed, overtaxed by stress, that mental toughness is going to be harder and harder and harder to access until you have that opportunity to rest. So just like you can't swim for 12 straight hours without taking some sort of rest, without replenishing some sort of food or energy, you can't go through one stress after another, after another, after another, and still expect to have that same level of mental toughness that you did on the first one. So rest, recuperation, all of those things are very, very necessary. But one thing that also stands out with these three, quote, synonyms of resilience is that they are all about what happens when you face something or as you're going through it. Resilience for me is about what happens on the other side. What happens when you've when you've overcome the adversity and you're on the other side of it. For me, resilience is found in the recovery, which I think is a really important message, that all of us have this ability to have an inner fire of courage that helps us move upward and onward after distress and difficulty. So it's more than just bouncing back. It is about how those experiences transform us and make us into more of an authentic version of who we are, into a much better version of who we can become. That for me is what resilience is. It's about having that hope and that courage to get through the thing. Well, there are a lot of people who have gotten through things, a lot of things, but I also see a lot of people who are very much in survival mode. And there's nothing wrong. I am such a huge proponent of survivors and an advocate of that. But survivorship is not the end all be all of where we can be. It is a stage, it is a step, it is part of the experience that we have. But I think there's a lot of folks, just due to the fact that they are not ever given that opportunity to rest, reflect, replenish from everything that they had to do to gear themselves up to get through something difficult. We often have a lot of people who are kind of stuck in survival mode, sorry. And that's kind of what I'm here to help us do, is elevate us from just simply surviving into actually being radiant with our resilience. And so I have a little compare and contrast here. I probably should switch these around a little bit, but in essence, when someone is stuck in survival mode versus when they're radiant and resilient, you see, when they are radiant and resilient, they have this inner fire and this wisdom. They have lessons learned that they can talk about. They also have a sense of purpose, and they have a sense of direction, and they have a sense of, at least I ain't going back there again. And when I do, I'm going to know how to act and how to get through that even better than I did the last time around. They're actively engaged with their life. Life is happening for them, not to them. They are integrated and authentic. They're not shaving off parts of themselves in order to make themselves more appeasing for others. They are able to stand there in that true vulnerability and say, this is who I am, and look at all the amazing things I've done because of who I am. And I'm just going to become more and more and more that honed, beautiful diamond because of all the pressure I've been through. And look at how amazing I have turned out, and look at how brilliantly I shine. When someone is in survival mode, and again, there's is not at all a dig against folks who apply that label to themselves. Like me, I am a survivor. But there have been moments in my journey where I have been stuck in my angry, resentful, risk averse sort of place. So either I'm approaching things completely out of fear, or I'm angry and I'm hanging on to it and the world owes me. There was a point where I was just passively going through life, where life was happening to me, where I didn't feel like I had the agency I needed in order to really make life happen for myself. I was compartmentalized. I was shut down. I was forcing a smile. If you're forcing a smile, that is not resilience. That is survival mode. When you are in your place of resilience, that smile comes naturally for you. You find something that makes you smile and you hang on to that. When you're in survival mode, you're also in this place of guarded perseverance over what happened to you. I am a survivor of sexual assault. And so there came a point where literally anything having to do with sex was just like, I was constantly on guard and arming myself against everything that had to do with sex, for example. And so if you find yourself feeling like you have to protect yourself from the world, that's not a place of resilience. That is still a place of survival, where it is that root chakra, sort of basic instinct, basic human need sort of place. When we are elevating ourselves into our heart, when we're elevating ourselves into our greater purpose, that's when you know you've reached resilience, which is actually why I call a lot of this stuff, in the imagery that I use is usually crowns, diamonds, something like that. You all are beautiful diamond, beautiful diamond people to me, because one thing that we need to take away from all of this is that resilience isn't reserved for just the heroes of our story. Resilience is about us. It's not just reserved for healing from big things. It's about the small shifts and changes that we make along the way. It is about allowing adversity to inform us as to the most authentic parts of ourselves that are worth preserving, that are worth hanging on to. Because those things that you hung on to in yourself in order to get through the things that we've all faced, because we've all faced them, has brought out a new facet, a new talent, a new insight, a new ability in yourself that is worthy of recognition and that is worthy of leadership. So it's everyday bravery. And for the folks that I used to work with, for example, coming to an appointment with us, that was an example of resilience, especially if someone has really, really difficult anxiety around meeting new people, unfamiliar situations, whatnot. Sometimes showing up is the hardest part of resilience. But when you do, that's when you know you're on that path of resilience, because you're challenging yourself to rely and trust yourself to survive no matter what situation comes at you. And like I said, remember, this is a muscle that continues to be built over time. The more we go through, the better muscle memory we have for this. So we're able to overcome bigger, better, brighter things and become bigger, brighter versions of ourselves. So it is also about, for example, going out with someone, going on a date after a bad breakup. That's resilience, my friends. It's showing up and being vulnerable. It's speaking up in the middle of a meeting after you've learned, through the hard way what happens when we don't speak up. It is that courage to be able to move onward and upward toward our higher selves and to bring out the highest in everyone else. And whether you realize it or not, you are an example of resilience for someone else in your life. And so I would challenge us, I'm going to stop the share now. I'm going to challenge us to start recognizing those areas where we have become the inspiration for somebody else, where we have become the model of resilience, because we really are. All of us have been through some stuff, and we talk about it a lot, but I want you all to really recognize how precious and special that really is. And as you recognize it in yourself, recognizing it in other people. And you might want to find other ways to describe it, because like I said, resilience itself is starting to become a little bit grates on people's nerves, because they'll say, well, you just need to be resilient. And they'll point to resilience and, they'll point to stoicism as resilience. And that to me is not quite the same thing. It's a strategy for sure. And it might actually be a characteristic. It might actually be a valued characteristic. But for me, that is not evidence of resilience in and of itself, because you can be stoic and still be hurting quite a bit underneath. And it's not to say that you have to be 100% healed in order to be resilient, but it is showing that glittering facet of light that only you possess. That is truly what resilience is. And it's having a comfort level with the vulnerability it took to get to where we are, the vulnerability it takes to tell our story, the vulnerability that we recognize in one another is truly what resilience is all about. And especially radiant resilience, which is what I am urging all of us to really try and embody in the various areas of our life. So my parting words to you today are to start constructing models of who is resilient in your life. Who would you be inspired by? Who are you inspired by in their story of resilience? What in their story resonates with you? And what in your story might resonate with other people? One thing that I've said over the past year is that COVID has forced us all to kind of turn inward a little bit. We don't have the distractions of sporting events and concerts and drama between our friends. I mean, we still have drama between our friends, let's be real. But we are not having that in our face every single day to take us off the path of knowing ourselves. So knowing ourselves, shifting how we interact with others, and embracing that vulnerability, these are all components of a wonderful, glorious, heart-centered leader. Because when you're comfortable with your own vulnerability, you're comfortable with the vulnerability in others. And you can start seeing the pathways in which they become resilient. You can start reflecting that resilience back to them and showing them that, hey, even if they hold you up as an example of that you recognize and see that in them as well. So that's all I've got for you today. Next week, I'm going to try to do a video probably based more on Biden's policies and more of a trauma-informed analysis of those policy priorities after the inauguration, and really starting to see how all of these things tie together on a policy level, on a social level. So I'll always do one video a month of each of the three components of what I view as the essential components of heart-centered leadership. But then the last week of the month, I'm going to always try to do an application of that. So you can see how all these things come together in one succinct sort of social priority or policy priority or, common human experience, because all of us are being called to be leaders in our own lives, in our own communities, in our own families, and especially for the world. So I really do appreciate the time that you spend with me. I want to hear your feedback. Please put in the notes, in the comments, who you look up to, who is your model of resilience and why. What characteristics do they bring that demonstrate that for you? So thank you so much. Please click to subscribe. I do also have a Patreon, Temple of the Rose Gold Heart, as well as a private Facebook group with the same name, where folks who are on that heart-centered leadership path can share with each other, boosts along the way, questions. I really want to start building community around this. So thank you again so much for your time and attention. And please ask me questions. I want to hear from you, and I want to do videos that are going to be useful for you. So thank you again, and have a wonderful week.